So welcome everybody. Welcome to our August refresher webinar. I have a confession to make. I do not have slides today. I'm going to kind of be improvising a little bit because it has been crazy in my life the past couple of days, work-wise mostly, but also family-wise. Good things going on. Watching my grandson. It's fun doing that a couple times a week. He's only 3, so he keeps us busy as we follow him through his mindful and mindless 3-year-old activities. Talk about getting grounded. Whew. Right in the moment. Mindful movement, that's what it is. When we're done taking care of him for a day, we're ready for a combination of a nap and physical therapy. So, but it's a lot of fun. And we're getting to know him a lot better. But anyway, today, since I don't have slides, I've been doing a lot of thinking, though, about what I'm going to talk about today. And I thought that I would settle on worry as a topic, kind of worry and anxiety. And I do have a few things to share with you, but I don't have the slides, but I'll kind of, as I said, I'm going to improvise as we go along here. And so as I do that, feel free to ask a question, either unmute yourself or use the chat. But please feel free to chime in. I'm happy to, this is sort of a free-flowing session today. And I was thinking about anxiety because we know that mindfulness and meditation can be very helpful for anxiety, just in the fact of helping us to relax, right? Just helping us decompress a little bit, step back from all that, and worry itself. And I've got a couple things to share with you about worry, and we're going to do a couple of meditations around worrying, which, you know, is not always unhelpful. Sometimes a little bit of worry can be helpful, but when we get caught up in it, and we can ask ourselves the question, is our worrying useful or not? And that's going to be the first meditation that we're going to do today. But I was, anyway, thinking about meditation as being a useful practice to help with anxiety, to kind of keep it under control. And to really, the idea of it is to change our relationship.
Along with the cold water.
Getting some
so
feedback.
Make sure you turn on the hot water pipe along with the cold water.
1 second here.
I don't know, but it's when you turn on the cold water, it does that. So make sure you have.
Here we go. So I've got everybody muted at this point so we don't get the background noise. And you can unmute yourself if you do want to chime in and ask a question or make a clarification. So what we're really doing with mindfulness and anxiety is changing our relationship to it. And this is from Dr. Luana Marquez, who's an anxiety specialist. I got this information off the 10% Happier app. And so she basically makes the point that, and we all know this, that there's a lot of anxiety around these days for understandable reasons. You know, we've been through unprecedented times, of course, and it continues, right? Just look at the news, pay attention to anything that's going on. We have another awful election period coming up. That's going to be another added stressor. We've got all sorts of things happening in our world around us that can easily trigger anxious thoughts. So she makes the point, when we get anxious, the amygdala, the threat center of the brain, turns on, which in turn turns off the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, the executive functioning of our brain. So as a result, we see the world in a distorted way. We start to misinterpret information as threat and believe that our thoughts are facts instead of just thoughts. And we may feel that something bad is about to happen. So we start to feel more and more anxious. We get anxious about the anxious thoughts. So see, it kind of gets into a vicious cycle. And as you know, I think many of you do a regular practice the more we practice looking at our thoughts in that sort of impartial way, we realize that our thoughts are not facts. You know, they're mental events that arise and flow through our kind of open sky of awareness, and often just dissipate and float away. The trick is not to get caught up in that. And that's essentially the trick that we're going to be talking about today, with not getting caught up in anxious or worry thoughts. So the other thing that I'll just mention, which we're not going to focus on today, but I think it's very important, is that mindfulness can also be used for depression. And not so much when we're in the midst of a depressive episode. If that's happening, I would suggest, reaching out for assistance. EFR is one place to do that. And I've shared that. I can share information about EFR. It's easy to get in touch. But let me also say, if you're reaching out for assistance through EFR and you're having any trouble just connecting with one of our providers, let me know, because I can troubleshoot that with our external program that does the services, because the mental health system is overloaded, and many of the folks of the licensed mental health providers are very busy. And so sometimes they're not responding in a timely way, and that shouldn't happen, but it does happen. So if you're having trouble, if there's any barriers to getting help, let me know through the program, and I can help expedite that. I can put you in touch with one of our counselors that can really help that along. So anyway, depression is one of those things, though, that there's a whole book on this, mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy. And essentially what it helps people is, if you have had a depressive episode, it helps us not kind of go into remission. It helps us not get back into that depressive thought process. And basically what it comes down to is the same kind of practice, is noticing our thoughts and noticing when we get caught up in those kinds of thought patterns. And with depression, of course, they tend to be negative thought patterns. And we know that many of our thought patterns are repetitive and kind of what we would call sticky thought patterns. And if you have a depressive history at all, and you've come out of it, some of the triggers that can lead us back into that. So again, I'm just pointing this out. I'm not going to get into this completely, but mindful practices and mindfulness cognitive behavioral therapy or treatment can be very helpful for that. So if you want some more information on that, reach out to me separately. I'm happy to put you in touch with some resources. So back to the anxiety. So Luana Marquez, she's a clinical psychologist and researcher at Harvard. She talks about the TEB process. So the TEB stands for thoughts, emotions, and behavior. And it's a way to understand what's happening in the brain and to slow down the brain so you're more equipped to break that spinning cycle. So the pause itself is helpful. So like I was saying, just pausing to breathe mindfully, pausing to take a meditation break, pausing to just interrupt that stress cycle can be helpful in and of itself. And when we do that, we are activating the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain. You're slowing down the hijack part of the brain in the limbic system, the amygdala, and we're re-engaging the prefrontal cortex. So that's what's happening neurologically in the brain. And she says, I like this quote, as some of the youth I work with say, it's a way of cooling off the brain. Okay, so it's this cycle. Let me, what I like to do at this point is share. I've got a couple of articles, and I'm happy to send these out to you later if you'd like to read the complete articles. Actually, before I do that, getting ahead of myself. Here's what happens when I improvise. My brain is going all over the place. But let me just share this. Can you see this, the COVID response employee assistance program? Let me make this a little larger. Thank you. So pausing, any questions about some of my rambling so far? Okay, so this is actually old data, but it's from our employee assistance program or EFR provider. This is in 2021, but, and you probably heard this, that, you know, COVID really amplified and, you know, accelerated the rates of mental health issues, but in particular, anxiety and stress. In fact, our numbers through EFR, those are the two highest areas that people reach out for help through the program. There are other areas, there are plenty of other things that people use the program for, but stress and anxiety are two of the highest areas. And so this particular slide just talks about the 3 times more Americans report being depressed than they were before the pandemic. And this shows the other areas that people use the program for. As I mentioned, anxiety and stress are two of the high areas. Marital relationships are other areas. Situational adjustment concerns. So those are the areas that people often use EFR for. And 1 in 3 individuals could have behavioral health needs in 2021 compared to 1 in 5 pre-pandemic. So that's carried forth to 2023. And 52% of adults report being more open about mental health due to COVID. I think that's a good sign. And I'm hoping that because we're having so much more conversations about our emotional and mental well-being, that it may help to reduce the stigma around it, right? And so getting back to the mindfulness activities, we know that they can be very helpful. And you've seen this slide before. Taking that break just kind of helps us tap into that peaceful place. It helps us interrupt that cycle, that spinning cycle, and helps us bring on the prefrontal cortex so that we can really think more clearly, we can be more present, we can problem solve a little bit better than about what's going on in our lives. And so I'm going to skip forward here a little, some of these slides and talk about this equation here. So this is kind of a cognitive behavioral concept, but so say there's a stressor, you might call it the activating event. And sometimes we think of the stressor as causing the stress itself, how we feel, the thoughts we're having, the emotional reactions we're having, the bodily response we're having to the stress. But what's really a key piece is that middle blue box there, the rumination that we might be having. In other words, the thinking, the overthinking we may be doing about the stressor, or the self-criticism. Sometimes we add to that by saying, you know, we should be doing better, or we should not be as affected by that particular stressor. In other words, we kind of criticize ourselves about how we're handling that, or being stoic about it. That's another way that we sometimes deal with this. And being stoic about it, what I mean by that in this sense is that we tend to want to stuff it or ignore it, or, you know, stiff upper lip and not, you know, pay any attention to it. So all of these things really add up to really increasing that stressor's effect, so that it's not just a minor stressor, but it becomes a chronic stress. And that's the trick. That's the trick in noticing it. This quote that I've shared before also says it from Mark Twain. My life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened, you know, so it's easy. It's very easy for us to get caught up and to be kind of focused in on and projecting about things that haven't even happened yet. And that's where the worry thoughts come up. So that's going to be what we're going to do first. Let me go back to this just so I put up a little bit of an image here as we do our first meditation. What time is it? Just checking the time frame. Good. All right, so before I go into the meditation itself, which is called Is Worrying Useful? And this is by Dan Harris from 10% Happier, based on his meditation anyway, a little variation of it. But any questions, any thoughts, anybody want to share anything? This is just my take on it, but I'm sure you all have insights into this. Anybody have anything you'd like to share at this point before we do the meditation?
I'll share, Bud.
Go ahead, Roberta. Thanks.
Yeah. So what I find with my anxiousness is it happens when I'm sleeping. Like I'll wake up in the middle of the night. That's when I know that my subconscious is dealing with something that I'm concerned about. And right now I'm concerned about my son. And I know it's out of my control what his challenges are, but I'm a mother and I still am concerned. So it's so interesting how I was with him last night, and then last night I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about his life, you know?
Right.
So that's
spinning thoughts, right?
Yeah. And it's so amazing because I know a lot of skills, but I'm still human. And
Me too.
Hard to control it in the middle of the night.
I totally agree. And thank you so much for sharing that, Roberta. I can completely relate to what you're saying. And I bet you a lot of us on the call today can. I'm not, never really been a big worrier, but that's when my worry thoughts pop up. And they are very, for some reason, my mind is like really, it feels like my mind is loose at that point, and I have little or no control over what my mind is doing. And same thing, when there's something going on in my life, that's when the worry thoughts pop up out of the subconscious, like you say, or the unconscious. And it is hard. And I have used a number of meditation practices and tips. A body scan is good for that, to kind of get out of the head and focus on the body. I use a particular kind of breathing for that, that helps me to relax, because usually I find myself more tense, which makes it harder to fall back asleep. And by the way, that's another topic that we could do someday, is focusing on sleep and how meditation and mindfulness can help with that. Because we know how difficult sleep is I forget what the stats are, but it's pretty incredible how many people have sleep issues, and that's probably increased post-pandemic also. But thank you so much for sharing that. This particular meditation that we're going to do might be helpful for that. And there's another one that we're going to do towards the end, which is based on Tara Brach. So comment here. Thank you, Deborah, from agreeing with Roberta. I've started putting on meditation sleep music when I wake up. That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a very good idea. I like that suggestion. To have some sort of thing to focus on, take our mind off of it. So I might try that as well. But I think, again, we can relate to that. I know, and it may have other manifestations, like, someone in my family, when she worries about her kids, it shows up in her belly, shows up in her digestive system. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that too, right? I mean, it goes that whole mind-gut connection right down the vagus nerve, and right down into that part of the body. So yeah, that's another good, thank you for that comment, Roberta, about got to be careful about the phone and screens and all those things which can affect the melatonin and our way to get back to sleep. All right, so let me do this. just before we go into the meditation, I'm going to pin myself. Okay, so today's meditation is again called Is Worrying Useful? If you want to hear the whole thing, it's on 10% Happier if you happen to have that app. But, we'll have it in this recording as well. So just as an intro, again, we all worry. I don't think there's any of us who are immune to it. And his teacher, Dan Harris's teacher, is Joseph Goldstein, who's another well-known instructor, one of the founders of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. He also does a bunch of meditations on 10% Happier. I think he's got a recent book out as well. But his advice for worrying is to ask yourself the question, is this useful? So he's not saying never to worry, because it's kind of impossible to stop all those worry thoughts, but to be mindful about it and to know and to be aware of when it crosses the line into useless rumination. So a great way to catch yourself, catch your worrying before it carries you away is mindfulness. So you'll see how that works in the meditation. So let's begin the actual meditation. So sitting in a position that's comfortable for you. Taking a moment to adjust your posture. That might mean sitting relatively upright, feet flat on the floor. These are just some guidelines. You probably have your own way of sitting. So finding that way, you can close your eyes if you'd like to. You don't have to, though. If you're more comfortable keeping them slightly open, that's fine. But I would say focusing downward in front of you with sort of a soft, unfocused gaze, maybe at one point, if you're going to keep your eyes open, or close them completely. And let's first just bring our attention into the body and just notice the body sitting here. And as we sit, know that you're sitting. And feel the points of contact supporting the body. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of the body being supported by the chair you're in. And just allow your attention to settle in the body and allow the body to be comfortable and relaxed. Maybe letting the shoulders drop and soften, letting the jaw relax, letting any other area of tension just soften and relax. And then bring your attention to the feeling of your breath going in and out. When you're breathing in, know you're breathing in. When you're breathing out, know you're breathing out. It can be that simple, right? But you might want to pick a spot where you feel the sensations of your breath most easily. That could be feeling the breath moving in through the nose, might be feeling it at the back of the throat, the windpipe, might be feeling it in the chest itself, the expansion of the lungs and ribs, or you might feel it at the belly. So if you want, pick a spot where you really feel the sensations of the breath and keep your attention there as best you can. And you can also use a soft mental note of in and out. So when you're breathing in, say to yourself in, and then out when you're breathing out. Or any words, you could use rising and falling, or you could use whatever you like, calm and ease, whatever is best for you, if it helps. Let's just do this for a while, just feeling the breath, paying attention, establishing and gathering our attention on the sensations of our breathing. After a while, you might notice thoughts popping up about all sorts of things going on in the mind. That's okay. Our mind just does that. Our mind continues to generate thoughts. Notice if there are some worry thoughts present. And if there are, you could even label them with a soft mental note of worrying, and then go back to the breath. So even just acknowledging a worry thought as it pops up, and then let it go and come back to the breath. And just feeling the breath coming in and going out. You don't have to think about the breath or worry about how you're doing. The breath is happening on its own. You could even bring up something you're worried about. I'll invite you to do that if you feel like it. You don't have to, but if you'd like to try it, bring up something small or moderate that you're concerned or worried about. And just be kind of curious about it. What happens when you bring that situation or person or worry up in your mind? And see if you can sort of just step back from that. In other words, not get caught up in it. You don't have to fix anything right now. You don't have to do anything about it. You're just noticing what happens when you pay attention to it. You might notice certain thoughts come up about it. There might be thoughts about trying to fix it or problem solve it. That's okay. Just notice the thoughts. Let them come, let them go. And you might also notice feelings that are attached to that. Just the feeling of worry or anxiety, or, it might bring up other feelings connected to that. Just, again, trying to notice those feelings arise without doing anything about them, just stepping back from them, noticing them as they show themselves. And continuing to breathe. Breathing is happening on its own. You can always return to that anchor of the breath to stabilize if that's helpful. Coming back to feeling the breath, the sensations of the breath at that one spot. Great way to reconnect with the present moment if you get pulled away, if you get sort of hijacked by the thoughts or feelings. But if you like, coming back to the worry thoughts and feelings, but now bring your attention into the body and see if you can notice where you feel the worry as it shows itself in the body. Again, just being curious about it, sort of keeping an open, receptive attitude, and see if you can feel maybe it's somewhere in the chest or the shoulders or the belly or the back or the jaw, just noticing where this anxiety or worry shows up. Continuing to breathe nice and easy. If you want to take a couple of deep breaths, feel free to do that. And you can even breathe into that area, kind of like helping to soften and relax that area. Still kind of being curious about how it shows itself. Just sort of noticing that process of what that's like. And now let's just let go of the worry situation and let's just come back to the breath itself, re-anchoring our attention, feeling the breath moving in and out. Know when you're breathing in, know when you're breathing out, feeling the sensations of this one breath. And remembering whenever your mind distracts you, and whether it's a worry thought or any other thought or any other distraction, you can choose to sort of ask yourself, is this helpful? And if it is helpful, you can continue to follow that line of inquiry. If it's not helpful, you can move on to something else. Gives us choice in the moment, sort of a little bit of space. Continuing to breathe. We might notice some insights. We might become more aware of patterns of thought, patterns of worrying, and we become perhaps better at noticing that and less receptive to being yanked around by those patterns. So we're using meditation to kind of hone our inner telescope, boosting our self-awareness. So the next time you catch yourself in a spiral of worry and rumination, you can ask yourself that magic question: is this useful? And if it's not, moving on to something else. And so as we come to a close of today's first meditation, just taking a moment to maybe take another deep breath. Feel your body again, anchored, feet on the floor, body in the chair. And when you're ready, kind of opening the eyes and coming back to awareness of your surroundings and moving out of the meditation and just kind of noticing what that was like. And I'll open it up. If anybody has any comments or questions, feel free to share them. But stop this share for a moment. Just see if you all have any thoughts of what that was like, any feedback, comments, questions. What did you think? There are a couple of other, like on our EFR Achieve Solutions page, we do have 30 or so guided meditations. A few of them are related to stress and anxiety, so you might check those out as well. And I thought I might share, I mentioned that before, I didn't do that yet, a couple of articles here, see if I can find those. So this one is from, I get their newsletter from Mindful Leader. And this has actually, the title of it is 10 Effective Methods to Soothe an Anxious Brain. And I won't go over all 10 of these, but I'll send you the link if you want to read the article. First one being, accept that anxiety is biological. So it's kind of like, in other words, kind of thinking of anxiety is, as we mentioned before, it's just part of the nervous system's fight or flight response, and the arousal of, sometimes it's necessary to be able to do that. But so the second one, consume stress hormones by burning restless energy. So when we get stressed and we get that sense of agitation or into that fight or flight mode, you might want to do some movement. It says here, in this part of the, being grounded in the body, getting out of the head, doing some give some good examples: yoga, qigong, dance classes, whatever it is, exercise out of the head into the body. Some slow, deep breathing. We know that can help to bring on the parasympathetic part of the nervous system. So whether it's counting the breath, or, there's lots of different ways to use the breath to calm ourselves down. Notice when you were catastrophizing. That's another good one. That's kind of what we were doing. We're trying to avoid doing in that exercise is being careful to notice that we don't get swept away. That's usually what's happening, is when we're catastrophizing about a situation. So again, Roberta, thank you. Another good comment. I noticed that when I paid attention to my worried thoughts about my son, my breath became shallow. Yeah, that's the good observation. I felt sad for his challenging situation and out of my control, there's something blocking that. Once I softened my heart, I felt calmer and sent my son love and hope that all will work out in time. Yeah, great example of using it in a helpful way so that you can not get caught up in the worry cycle, the catastrophizing cycle, but in a way that you can calm yourself down, and you'll be much more able to send him those helpful thoughts and be able to maybe even do something directly helpful. So anyway, there's a bunch of good stuff in here. The other article I wanted to share, and again, I'll send the link out, is 10 Attitudes of Mindfulness as it relates to the title of this is 10 Mindful Attitudes for Reducing Anxiety. I've talked a number of times about attitudes related to mindfulness, and a lot of these are related to that. Beginner's mind is a good one, so, I mentioned that in the meditation a couple of times, being curious and open and receptive, sort of using a beginner's mind, noticing in a curious way, beginner's way, what are the thoughts, going on, what emotions come up, what's happening in the body. So trying to notice that as if for the first time, using that beginner's mind. Being patient with yourself, simple acknowledgement, non-judgment about yourself or the situation, non-striving. Again, with the non-striving, we want to, we're especially I think in healthcare, we're very good at trying to fix things and change things and problem solve. So with meditation and mindfulness, it's quite the opposite. We're trying to not do. We're trying to just be with it and not strive to fix things all the time. Not easy to do, right? So I'll send this out too. There's other good things here: letting be or allowing. Another balance, equanimity, all good. Self-compassion, important qualities, especially when we're dealing with difficult emotions and difficult situations. So I'll send these out and you can read those at your leisure. What I thought I'd do next is talk a little bit about and finish with something called Breaking the Worry Addiction, which is kind of similar. It's by Tara Brach, and I can send you this handout. I don't have a recording of it. Just going to pull it up, but I don't have it. But I'll share it with you. I'll just share it as I have it in front of me here. So breaking the worry addiction is knowing the difference between fear and anxiety. So she makes the point, fear is the emotional state that arises in response to a perceived immediate threat, right? So something that's right there in front of you. But anxiety is the emotional state that arises in response to an anticipated threat, to the perception that things might go wrong. And that's kind of what we practiced before, right? We were noticing and not getting carried away into that cycle of rumination or catastrophizing. And she points out that they have the same physiological response and that anxiety can become addictive, that there's a mind-body looping that goes on. So brings up the question, how do we release chronic anxiety? And her three-part way of doing that is becoming mindful. The first part is becoming mindful of your anxious thoughts, just like we did before. Dropping into your body, becoming mindful of the physical sensations, and then offering yourself some comfort or care. That's the third step. Is we didn't do that before. So we'll do that in our closing practice. So let's begin this, and I'll send this out. There's a handout I have on this. I'll send this as well so that you can use this going forward. I think what I'll do is bring up this again just to have sort of a backdrop. So this is breaking the worry addiction. So again, closing the eyes, finding a comfortable position, taking a moment to just collect your attention. That may be focusing on the body itself as it sits, feeling into the body, feeling the floor, feeling that sense of groundedness. Might also be taking a couple of deep breaths, feeling the breath moving in and out, allowing the exhale in particular to let the body relax and soften and settle. And just take a moment to let the body be comfortable, balanced, relaxed. And as we close the eyes, bring to mind something that makes you anxious. We'll do that again, if you're okay with that. And notice the type of worry thoughts that arise. So this time we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what kinds of worry thoughts come up as we think about this situation that makes us anxious. Again, remember, try to be a little bit objective about this. We're stepping back from it. We're not getting caught up in it. We're not trying to fix anything right now. We're just observing. One way to do that is you can kind of think of yourself or maybe as sitting in a movie theater, and you're sitting in the seats in the movie theater, and the scene or the scenario is playing out on the screen. You're observing it. You're not in it. You're observing what's going on. And so now notice the kinds of thoughts that come up. These could be planning thoughts, fixing thoughts, rehearsing, analyzing, judging. And these may take the form of a voice in your head, kind of audio, or visual images. And as you do that, you might mentally note to yourself, kind of mentally whisper to yourself what it is. Maybe it's planning something or rehearsing something, whatever it is, just mentally noting that to yourself. And now, again, bring your awareness below your neck and notice wherever you feel the most vulnerability in your body. You might sense pressure, tightness, heat, or tension. You might check your throat, chest, neck, shoulders, belly, back. It takes a little courage and willingness. And remember, you can come back to the breath, or you keep the breath flowing nice and easily as we do this. Let your breath be long and slow. Just see if you can notice where you feel it in the body. Doing your best to keep your body relaxed. And now sense what message might be most comforting. What does your anxious self most need to hear? Perhaps it's okay, I'm with you. Or that's then and now is now. Or I'm fine in this moment. You might find it's helpful to place your hand on your heart as you do this, or some other gesture of self-kindness or compassion. And again, just notice what message might be most comforting to yourself. What would you tell your best friend going through this situation? And give that same advice to yourself. Maybe taking another deep breath as we do this, feeling the breath in and out. And we're going to bring ourselves slowly back to our surroundings. Ground yourself again, feeling your feet, weight of your body in the chair. And take a moment to notice what's changed, if anything. Take a moment to just reflect. And what if anxious thoughts return? Well, they often do, right? So you can trust that each time you pause and go through this kind of exercise, you're deconditioning your tendency to worry. It takes a little time and practice, but that's really what you're doing. You're deconditioning that worry pattern, that thought process. But the outcome can be very liberating and life-giving, and it can free up huge amounts of energy. So give it a try. And as I said, I'll send out the sheet so you'll have it. So with that, I'm going to come to a close. But before we close, just kind of, I'll stop the share. Any last thoughts or questions from anybody? I hope this has been helpful, but apologize for not having a formal slides together for you, but just the way it is sometimes, right? Any questions, thoughts, comments about the exercises we did today? Stop the recording. Say thank you very much for joining me.